We'll begin with opening statements and then get right to the Secretary's testimony. The Chair will now recognize himself for an opening statement. 3 years ago, Secretary Mayorkas sat at that table and told this committee the border is secure. 8 to 10 million people entered our country in a 4-year time illegally, record levels of fentanyl smuggled in, stories of women and children being harmed and abused, and we all remember what we saw. Whether it was the bridge in Del Rio, all the thousands of people waiting to be processed there, when we took trips to McAllen. I mean, we all remember what we saw. Agents had become processors and chauffeurs for the Biden administration's open border policy. And Secretary Mayorkas told this committee in that same chair that Secretary Noem sits in now that the border is secure. Kind of reminds me of that now somewhat famous moment on television where the CNN reporter is standing in front of the burning building and saying, it's a mostly peaceful protest. I mean, it was just ridiculous what the secretary said. And Secretary Mayorkas didn't stop there. Remember when he went after Border Patrol agents, said they were horsewhipping migrants trying to come? Remember that just completely made up story? Remember when we asked Secretary Mayorkas how many illegals, again, sat right in this committee here and we asked him, how many illegals on the terrorist watch list have been released into the U.S.? How many have been released into the country? Anyone remember his response? I don't know. And we're like, man, you're the Secretary of Homeland Security. That's probably something you should know, particularly when you come in front of the Judiciary Committee and we ask you that question. Remember when days before a hearing, subsequent hearing, because we got tired of the I don't know response from Secretary Mayorkas, we sent him a letter with questions we were going to ask him so he couldn't say I don't know. Basically like the professor giving the students here's the exam, here's the questions on the exam, be prepared to deal with these at the appropriate time. When he got to committee, we asked him those questions, and again he said, I don't know, I'll have to get back with you. And of course, he never did get back with us. Remember when Secretary Mayorkas wrote the memo, the Mayorkas memo? Aliens removable under the Immigration Nationality Act. He said the Immigration Nationality Act should not alone be the basis of an enforcement action. Really? The law shouldn't be the basis for an enforcement action? It should be something else? It should be your memo? That was exactly the policy. A whole new standard the last administration set. They let 8 to 10 million people in, a whole new standard of how you were going to deal with people who were in violation of federal law. And remember when Secretary Mayorkas went even further. He did the Protected Areas Memorandum. And this is the situation when you're trying to follow federal law, trying to enforce federal law. He said you can't apprehend an illegal migrant, maybe one who's been charged with another crime and been released in a sanctuary jurisdiction, something I know some of these angel families know something about, been released in a sanctuary jurisdiction, you can only apprehend them at certain locations. So in other words, think about it. It says, in or near certain protected areas, you should not apprehend an illegal migrant. A school, preschool, primary school, secondary school, place of worship, place where children gather, such as a playground, recreation center, all these restrictions on federal law enforcement being able to enforce federal law. So think about it. Some sanctuary jurisdiction, illegal migrants been charged with another crime, maybe a crime abusing children, is released because the detainer is not honored, he's not turned over to ICE, is released to the streets. You're not allowed to go get a guy who's been charged with harming kids if he's near a school, if he's near kids. That was how ridiculous everything was in the last administration. But here's the good news. Secretary Noem has rescinded the Mayorkas memo, has rescinded the Protected Areas memo. Under Secretary Noem, fentanyl coming in the country is down, women and children are safer, and most importantly, under Secretary Noem and President Trump's leadership, the border is now secure. Remember that moment? We all remember the great speech the President gave last week at the State of the Union, but the joint address he gave the year before, one of the best lines I remember with that address was he said, people said you need a new legislation to secure the border. Turned out all you needed was a new president. Remember that line? It's true. A new president with the secretary who was doing her job. In 1 year's time, 700 people have been deported under Secretary Noem's leadership. Nearly 3 million people have left the country. 1,400 known or suspected terrorists have been arrested. Not Secretary Mayorkas telling, I don't know, the status of people we've encountered on the border on the terrorist watch list. It's an amazing record, Madam Secretary, but there's still one big problem. Oh, one other thing. Another thing that's not going on at the Department of Homeland Security now, no more disinformation governance board. No more bureaucrats on a board telling Americans what they can say, what they can tweet, what they can read, what they can post. No more censorship going on at the Department of Homeland Security. But there is still one big problem. And I know the Secretary wants to deal with this, and we're going to deal with this tomorrow with legislation that we plan to mark up in this committee, and that is the sanctuary jurisdiction policies that are happening all over the country. Left-wing political officials in state and local government telling their local law enforcement, do not work with federal law enforcement when it comes to enforcing federal law. 1/3 of the country, almost 1/3 of the country lives in the sanctuary jurisdiction. 18 cities, 11 states, 3 counties, District of Columbia, but they're big population areas. 31.5% of the country lives in a jurisdiction where that is the policy. That may be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And we talked about this individual case last week. Abraham Gonzalez, September 20th, 2023, is arrested by Border Patrol for illegally entering the country. Of course, the Biden administration released him. 5 months later, he's charged with assault. 2 weeks after that, he's charged with motor vehicle theft. He stole a car. He's arrested by Denver police 9 days later, placed in the Denver Justice Center. 6 days after that, ICE sends a detainer notice to the Denver Justice Center. And all the detainer notice is give us a heads up if you're going to let this guy out. Just give us a heads up. But instead of doing that, instead of doing the common sense thing, in Denver, sanctuary jurisdiction, they give the federal government the finger and they release them to the streets. Release them to the streets. It's right here on the form. Denver Sheriff Department ICE notification being released to the streets on 2/28/2025. And here's what's interesting. This guy, they knew how bad he was because while he was in the Denver Justice Center, they have on the form, he's been violent to staff, keep him separate from all other inmates. So he's so dangerous, staff can't be around him, other inmates can't be around him, but they're going to release him to the streets instead of turning him over to ICE. Again, dumbest policy I have ever heard, but that is what the left now fully embraces. Let me give you a more recent example. Marvin Morales Ortiz. This is just next door, Fairfax County, Virginia. Detainer is sent, but the Fairfield County Justice Center says we will not honor the detainer. They tell him that on September 14th, 2025. They release Mr. Ortiz on December 18th, 2025. The next day, he kills an American. Next day, he kills an individual, murders someone. That is what happens in sanctuary jurisdiction. That is why tomorrow help is on the way, because we're going to mark up legislation that will deal with this. And I think I believe it will pass our committee. I believe it will pass the House. We'll get it to the. I want this to become law. I think most people with common sense want it to become law. The Shutdown Sanctuary Policies Act, which will give the people, one thing in our bill that we're going to have in the bill tomorrow too, be in the legislation, it will give the people behind you, where that scenario is played out, your loved one has been harmed by someone who should have been turned over to ICE but was released. It'll give you a private right of action for these angel families. Private right of action where you can go after the government who engaged in that stupid behavior. So, Secretary, I want to thank you for your work. I want to thank you for being willing to come today and answer our questions. And with that, I will yield to the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member, for his opening comments.
Well, thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary Noem. We're glad to meet you, even though it's been 13 months since you took office and more than 5 weeks since 2 American citizens were shot dead in Minneapolis. Renee Good was a 37-year-old poet, about 20 years younger than you are now, and like you, both a devout Christian and the mother of 3. She was on her way home from school drop-off when she encountered an ICE operation, and one of your agents shot her dead, shot her 3 times. She bled out in the driver's seat of her car after your agents refused to let a doctor or EMTs approach her. You expressed no sympathy for her family and no regret for her killing by an ICE agent. You ran a smear campaign against Renee Good. You called her a domestic terrorist. Alex Preddy was also 37 and, like you, a federal worker. He was an ICU nurse at a VA hospital, outstanding in his job, providing comfort to many of our vets in their final hours. He was standing on a street corner filming your agents as they roughed up peaceful protesters. Americans have a First Amendment right to record government agents in public places, as 8 different federal circuit courts have unanimously found. But your agents pepper sprayed Alex Preddy for helping a woman that they had pushed to the ground. Then they threw him to the ground. They beat him up. They stripped him of a lawful firearm he had never touched. And then, after confiscating it, they shot him dead with 10 bullets. Before his body was even cold, you launched a smear campaign against him, using the same language, asserting without evidence that Alex Preddy had committed a, quote, act of domestic terrorism and intended to kill law enforcement. This disturbing video tells the true facts you tried to cover up with propaganda, and we can play it only because other brave Americans used their phones to capture the actual reality of this horror.
Deadly ICE-involved shooting out of Minneapolis. The Minneapolis police chief says a woman was killed after being shot in the head by an ICE agent.
No!
Renee Nicole Good was a 37-year-old U.S. citizen and mother of 3 who moved to Minnesota just last year.
It was an act of domestic terrorism.
Breaking news in Minneapolis and another deadly shooting involving a federal officer in that city. This video shows the incident from this morning with officers surrounding a man before taking him down and shooting him during a struggle. Officials later said the man had died. Minneapolis city officials said the man is a 37-year-old white male, a resident of Minneapolis. They also say he is believed to be an American citizen and that he was a lawful gun owner with a permit to carry.
This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Madam Secretary, you've provided no evidence to back up your defamatory lie against either of these American citizens. There have been 3 homicides in Minneapolis in 2026. Your agents committed 2 of them. Rather than work with state and local authorities to solve these homicides, you barred Minnesota's investigators from the crime scenes. You're denying them access to all the evidence that you have about the deaths of their citizens. It smells like a cover-up, and it makes me wonder who the real domestic terrorists are. But you didn't just lie about Renee Good and Alex Preddy. In dozens of cases, federal judges have found that your officials lied to them in court. A Reagan-appointed judge rejected the testimony of your acting ICE director as, quote, disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable. Another judge called the affidavit of a top ICE official, quote, the sorriest statement I've ever seen, adding she was shocked when she saw it, and that if you were asking to get a warrant issued on this, I'd throw you out of my chambers. Here are a few more examples of the many scores we found in the case books. Yesterday, you insisted under oath to the Senate that you follow court orders. But that's not true either. Just last month, your lawyers were forced to admit that you had violated immigration court orders more than 50 times in 10 weeks. And that was just in New Jersey, one of 94 judicial districts in America. In Minnesota, Judge Patrick Schultz, a George W. Bush appointee, concluded, quote, that ICE has likely violated more court orders in January of 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. And while you make a daily mockery of our courts and our Constitution, you're treating the billions of dollars our colleagues showered on your department like a personal slush fund. You budgeted an astonishing $220 million for media consultant contracts so you can star in self-promoting photo shoots and lavish ad campaigns like this one of you riding horseback at Mount Rushmore, which was shot during last year's government shutdown. You're living rent-free in the official waterfront residence reserved for the commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard. You spent $172 million to buy not one, but 2 luxury jets for your travel, and now you're using taxpayer funds to lease a 3rd jet, a $70 million luxury 737 MAX with a queen-size bedroom in the back, a deluxe serving bar, and 4 flat-screen TVs. A big, beautiful jet paid for by the big, beautiful bill. Yesterday, under questioning the Senate, you said you plan to refurbish this jet to make it into this kind of airplane, which is what's actually being used for deportations in order to save the taxpayers' money. In other words, you're saying that's actually a deportation plane, but wouldn't it have been cheaper just to buy a deportation plane in the first place? It's like buying a Rolls-Royce to turn into a Metro bus. I was almost prepared to buy that story of how the jet was both for executive travel and mass deportation. And then I heard about an airborne episode of entitlement, arrogance, and contempt that I could hardly believe. Apparently, when your special blanket, your blankie, was left on one of the government jets and not transported over to the new one, your special government employee, Corey Lewandowski, chivalrously stepped forward to fire the pilot midair, a 2003 Coast Guard Academy graduate and distinguished U.S. Coast Guard commander in Air Station, Washington, D.C. But then he had to be rehired immediately because there was no one else who could fly the 2 of you on the rest of the journey back home. Secretary Noem, you're flying high now, maybe even a little bit too close to the sun. But with all these free planes and houses and pilots, you've traveled a long distance from your actual job and the things you should be doing as head of Homeland Security. Your agency is charged with protecting the homeland. It includes FEMA, TSA, the Secret Service, the Coast Guard, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, as well as ICE and CBP. Yet you've hollowed out the national security mission. You redeployed thousands of people responsible for tracking terror financing and fighting cyber threats to go work on your mass immigration roundup. You reassigned to the roundup agents working a key national security probe into Iran's terror financing, paralyzing that investigation. And to run what's left of Homeland Security's ruined terrorism prevention office, you actually installed a 22-year-old intern whose chief listed qualification for the job was that he had participated in a model UN club his junior year of college. Through FEMA, you're supposed to provide disaster relief to our communities. Yet last summer, as floods devastated central Texas and killed 135 people, including 25 girls and 2 counselors at a Christian summer camp, you withheld crucial support, including search and rescue teams, for 72 hours. Why? Those were 3 crucial days during which people drowned and died, waiting for bureaucratic approval. You promised to use ICE and CBP to expel the worst of the worst, undocumented immigrants guilty of committing violent crimes like the people responsible for murdering the children of these angel families, these angel moms and dads who've joined us today. Instead, your masked agents have been indiscriminately rounding up any and all immigrants and citizens who your agents think look like they might be immigrants. They've arrested kindergartners, daycare teachers, and parents dropping off kids at school. They drag grandparents out of their homes in their underwear in sub-zero temperatures and rip children out of their beds in the middle of the night or use them as bait to arrest their parents. Just last month, your agents picked up Nurul Shah Alam, a severely disabled and nearly blind Rohingya refugee, lawfully in America, who didn't speak English. You claimed your agents dropped him at a safe, warm location. Again, not the truth. They dropped him off miles from his home in the dark at a closed coffee shop in sub-freezing temperatures. And now, because of this cruelty, this man too is dead. You have 250,000 employees and a budget larger than that of 150 countries. You command over 80,000 sworn law enforcement officers, more than the number of police officers in New York, Chicago, LA, Houston, DC, Las Vegas, and Dallas combined. On top of that, our colleagues have handed ICE an additional $75 billion by slashing funds for Medicaid, children's health insurance, and rural hospitals. Secretary Noem, your job is to protect the homeland, but the most precious possession that we've got in our homeland is our freedom and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that protect it. You seem to have forgotten what our most precious possession is. The billions of dollars showered on your department have paid for violence and chaos in the American heartland and a sweeping assault on the basic rights of the American people. But the heroic citizens of Minneapolis have shown America how to fight back against this reign of terror and win with the truth, with solidarity, with mutual self-help, with creative joy and humor and music, with mass nonviolent assembly and protest, and with irrepressible love of children and kindness towards animals and other living things. You've turned our government against our people, and you've turned our people against our government. But the people are winning today, although we know we must continue to wake up every day, like the people of Minneapolis, and go out and fight for constitutional freedom. We are clearly in the fight of our lives, and we obviously have very serious questions for you today about what you are turning our government into. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back without objection. All of their opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witnesses. Ms. Noem has served as the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security since January 25th, 2025. She previously served as the governor of the great state of South Dakota and was our colleague here in the House of Representatives. And we welcome our witness and thank her for appearing today and for the work that she is doing. We will begin by swearing you in. You know how this works, Madam Secretary. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony. And Madam Secretary, you are recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Raskin, for your opening statements. And I look forward to discussing the work that the Department of Homeland Security does each and every day to defend our homeland. I also want to take a personal privilege and thank my husband for being here, too. He's going to have to go catch a flight in a few hours, but I'm glad he could be here today. And then I want to remind you of why we're all here. Like, I've had people ask me over and over again, you know, Kristi, why did you say to President Trump that you would do this job? And I said, because this is going to be a difficult job. It's going to be a hard job. We're going to have to secure our border and make sure we're going after dangerous criminal illegals and remove them from our country. And every day, we're going to have to make tough decisions to uphold the law, but to make sure that the consequences for breaking the law are put in place as well. The one thing I would say is I wasn't quite prepared for was the heartbreaking stories I would hear. The families that have lost their children, their brothers and their sisters, to dangerous people that came into this country that never should have been here to begin with. They never should have been here, and then they perpetuated violent crimes against these people. I heard one story, I'll never forget hearing Rachel Morin's mom tell the story of how she was killed. And to listen to a mom talk about how her daughter was slammed into her head exploded, and then he raped her and left her dead, when knowing that Rachel had 5 kids too, that now didn't have a mom anymore, and that individual should have never been in this country. So the reason that I do this job every single day is for that, is that somebody has to do the right thing and tell the stories of these families and make sure that we don't sit around here and make political pot shots on falsehoods and lies, like I just heard from the ranking member, that instead we do the right thing to defend these families and remember their children. Behind me are families with children. These are the children's names that we've lost. Weston Funder, Megan Booz, Carlos Wolf, Sander Cohen, Ryan Lang, Drew Swan, Sydney Shurkin, Jesse Bira, Heaven Lee Nelson, Dana and Ricky Keem, Austin Babcock, Michael Bowden, Logan Harris, Leo Toe, Haley King, Rain Reese, Wesley Green, Krisha Odette, and we are still very blessed to have little Miss Delilah with us. Delilah's right behind me, and she and I are good friends, and she was hit by a vehicle, by a truck that was driven by someone who's in this country illegally and had an illegal CDL. That accident should have never happened because he never should have been in this country, and he certainly shouldn't have been behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. But she's still with us, and she's doing good, and she's telling her story with her dad and her family and continuing to make sure that we do the right thing here on Capitol Hill. Listen, the Department of Homeland Security was established after the attacks on 9/11. It was established to defend our homeland, to put all the agencies together that have that mission, and that's what we do each and every day. We make sure that we enforce the law and that we protect our homeland, and that the families that live here, the American citizens, are our #1 priority. For 10 straight months, Border Patrol has released 0 illegal aliens into this country. In President Trump's first historic year back in office, over 3 million illegal aliens have left our country. We've arrested 700,000 of them and detained them and removed them from the country, but over 2.2 million of them left voluntarily. You know why? Because we told them to. We marketed to them. We ran a media campaign. It was the most effective media campaign in the history of this country. $39 billion of taxpayer savings because those people left and got off of our programs, and we didn't have to deport them at a cost of $18,000 apiece. They went on their own, and it saved the taxpayers $39 billion because we told this country and the 8 countries they were coming from that we were enforcing our laws and you couldn't stay here illegally anymore. ICE has arrested over 1,500 known or suspected terrorists. 1,500 that Joe Biden let in over that open border during that invasion that we found and we've removed. And we're going to continue to do that work because we don't know how many more there are still here. Over 7,700 gang members. And Mr. Chairman, Joe Biden lost 450,000 children that they allowed the cartels to traffic over the border. They used them, they abused them, they put them with government sponsors and paid government sponsors to abuse them and traffic them. We have found 145,000 of them, but I'm not going to stop until we find them all, and we'll continue to do that. Fentanyl trafficking over the southern border is down 56% because of President Trump. We continue to stop drugs. 1.7 lethal doses of drugs have been stopped from coming into our country in the last year. Phenomenal. Phenomenal. It's amazing to me how once President Trump came into office, they quit talking about the drug epidemic. The media doesn't cover it anymore, do they? That's because there's 1.7 billion people that are still alive today in this world because we've stopped them. And that invasion over the southern border made those cartels rich. You want to know why they're so sophisticated now? Why they have high-tech weapons? Why they have drones? Why they're able to be so successful? Is because they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to for 4 years. And Biden enriched them, and the Democrat Party enriched them so that they could perpetuate violence against the United States. Mr. Chairman, I could go on, but I will look forward to the conversation today, and I look forward to continuing to fight for America. Thank you. I yield back.